Hello and welcome back to Tyrion, Cuthbert, Attorney of the Arcane. Last time we started the first case and just see the beginning of how the game changed. And this time I believe we're going to be going into the first trial. Here we go. Celeste was going to be detained in Ratholme, Wyvernguard's capital city. She was apparently the prime suspect in Flinhart's murder. Oh yeah, and Celeste's father died. Very sad stuff happened last time. Her case would be pushed to the trial within a day. Supposedly, they discovered the traces of magic at the crime scene. That honestly just raised even more questions. Miss Tamora and I were determined to get to the bottom of this. The Inquisition, on the other hand, did what they always did. This is ridiculous. She has a right to speak to an attorney. Okay, hello, Orym, I believe that is how your name is pronounced. Last time when I tried to give you a voice, I think I failed disastrously because I feel like you sounded exactly like Flinhart. So I'm going to try and do like an old man voice as best as I can. Yeah, no, that's it. Yeah, well, we deep and gravelly. Yeah, well, we can't let you see her until she's been processed. Orym White, the grumpy and apathetic leader of the Arcane Inquisition. He's had a personal grudge against Miss Tamora for as long as I can remember. Orym White was the commander of the Arcane Inquisition. Miss Tamora had supposedly run into him many times. He always looked like the textbook definition of someone who was too old for this. I didn't usually accompany Miss Tamora to our crime scenes, but the few times I had, he was always there to run interference. He always looked like he cared more about making trouble for us than actually doing his job. The Inquisition was deep in the nobility's pockets. I'd always assumed that they were paying him to sabotage us. Don't give me that. There's no way you haven't processed her with the trial this close. Yeah, well, unless you can prove it, I don't need anything. And, okay. I remember I did her voice in like the opening scene, and I feel like it sounded very similar to Celeste, or maybe I'm just completely misremembering that. But I have an idea, and I just gonna. What's with all this noise? Oh, ugh. The commander's back straightened out, his smirk turned into a wince as the girl walked into the chambers. Whoever she was, she must have been younger than me. Despite that, her voice carried the weight of her authority, someone which Orym clearly relented to. Her aura was as cold and rigid as stone. Her disposition was probably equally so. Celeste McCoy has a right to counsel, and I know who you are. I know who you are, Ruby Tamora. She turned to Orym. She was almost half his size, but he was practically flinching at her every word. Well, the girl hasn't been processed yet. She just let out an irritated sigh as she waved him away. Let them through. What? But... Let them through before I throw you into the cell next to hers. Yes, lady. I mean, Miss Steelwind. Steelwind? Aria Steelwind, a prosecutor from the nobility who hails from House Steelwind, one of the four pillar families. In Wyvernguard, she's the daughter of the Grand General Lucio Steelwind, leader of Wyvernguard's military. It's hard to read her motivations, even with the Eye of Horus. She gave me a passing glance as if she were silently appraising me. Is this on auto? It is on auto. How do I... Okay, we're good. I had to wade through a thickening fog of emotions as we descended further into the dungeons. The collective anger and sorrow of the prisoners was choking me. I'd always hated crowds. I can never shut out the storm of I could never shut out the storm of thoughts and emotions that came with them, but I tried my best to keep it together. Celeste was going through a lot more than I was. Oh! Celeste was curled up on the floor, arms wrapped around her knees. Once she saw us, she scrambled to her feet. What are you doing here? We know about what happened to your father. I'm so sorry, Celeste. I still can't believe it. Thanks. Her response came out hollowly. You're the Inquisition's prime suspect in the murder, and they're planning to push your case to trial. You'll be brought to court in a few hours. What? No one told me anything. My mentor scoffed in disgust. She was all too familiar with this. They were planning to convict you before you even realized you were on trial. Celeste, Miss Tamora is the best defense attorney in Wyverngard. She can help you. You've been supporting your family from your work as a mercenary, is that correct? Did she just say mercenary? Celeste's occupation. From your financial history, it appears that you can afford my services. How would you even know that? That's not important. What matters is that if I'm representing you, your case is as good as won. You don't even know what happened. Then tell me. Celeste hesitated, her shoulders tensing at the memory. I got into an argument with my dad, and I left to clear my head. Tyrion found me a bit after that. I think it was a few hours after I left. When we came back, we saw the knights outside. That's when they arrested me. Celeste, if I'm going to be your attorney, I need to know everything that happened. What? They found your sword inside his body, and there were traces of transmutation magic around the crime scene. There aren't any other registered mages in Cornhaven. I need you to tell me the truth. I just told you everything that happened. What are you? She looked down, confused, before her face tightened in a scowl. I think you're a filthy murderer. You think I actually did it, don't you? You think I was the one who killed him? Wait, Miss Tamora. Before I left the tavern to look for her, I ran into Flinhart. He was still alive. And how much time passed between that and when you found her? It was probably about 2 hours, but... Which means there are 2 hours where she wasn't accounted for. We can work around that, but the prosecution was still... No, I didn't do this. She's telling the truth, Miss Tamora. Celeste would never do something like this. Cuthbert, you can't just believe every innocent girl who bats her eyes at you. That is not what this is. Well, did you see that she's innocent? Can you tell me that with certainty? Celeste was being defensive at the moment, too guarded for me to read anything substantial with the Eye of Horus. I didn't see it, but I know that she's innocent. Look, either way, we need to construct a proper alibi so I can... No, how can I work with you if you don't even believe me? Do you even understand the situation you're in? I know exactly what's happening. My dad's dead, and whoever killed him is still out there. Don't be naive. You're a commoner. You're lucky I'm even here. There isn't a single attorney other than me who will defend someone like you. Yeah? Well, what about him? I blinked, confused for a moment, before I realized that she was pointing at me. You're also a defense attorney, right? I am, but, He's just a kid, McCoy. He's never even defended a case before. He is worthless. I don't care. At least he doesn't think I'm a murderer. Celeste, hold on here. So you can take your attitude and leave. I don't need your help. Fine. Have it your way. But when you're staring down the gallows and begging me to appeal your conviction, I'll be charging you triple my rate. Before I could understand what was going on, Miss Tamora turned away and stormed out. As she reached the door, she looked back at me expectantly. I froze. I knew I wasn't in any position to handle a case like this. That said, I also knew I couldn't leave her to face this alone. My mentor let out a quiet sigh before quietly exiting the dungeons. Sorry, I didn't mean to put you in the middle of that. I can go talk to her. I'm sure she'll come back and take your case. No, I meant what I said. I don't want her help. Celeste, this is serious. Your conviction might as well be a foregone conclusion to the courts. Without Miss Tamora, I'll be fine. I know I just pulled you into this without asking. If you want to walk away, I'll understand. I'll figure something out. She tugged a few times at the cell door, separating us. I could have sworn I saw metal bars bending. I exhaled slowly. I knew I wasn't ready for this. I can't stand by and do nothing. I'll take your case if you'll have me. Really? But there's one thing I need you to tell me. The Arcane Inquisition was called to the scene. I had no idea how they even knew magic had been used, but their presence could only mean one thing. Are you a mage? Yeah, I am. When that villager confronted me, he called her a bastard. It made a lot more sense now. Do you have noble blood? What does that have to do with anything? It's not like, what do you think I am? A dragon? That would be crazy. The ability to use magic is hereditary. Almost every mage descends from the nobility in some way. If you have birth parents in the nobility, we might be able to use their influence to our advantage. I don't need anyone else's help. I'm a McCoy. That's all I need to know about myself. It seems best not to push that matter further then. Even so, that's probably why they arrested you. What? Miss Tamora mentioned it earlier. A town of farmers like Cornhaven wouldn't have any other registered mages. It's a good thing you registered with the kingdoms. It would have just added one extra charge if you hadn't. But they found traces of magic at the scene of the crime. They had no choice but to suspect you. Are you serious? I'll be honest, I'm not sure how much help I'll really be. Miss Tamora said it herself. I've never defended a client before. Is everything really going to be okay? Why would I say something like that? You idiot, 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 idiot. A defense attorney should be putting the clients at ease. But no matter what, I'll get you an acquittal. It doesn't matter who stands in my way, man, king, or god. What? Sorry, I just used to say that a lot as a kid, and no, it's okay. At least I made her laugh. Anyways, take some time to rest up. The trial will begin in a few hours. I couldn't imagine what she was going through. She not only lost a father, but she was also being framed for his murder. But this was exactly why I became an attorney, to defend people exactly like her. Stories like her were far too common, but this time I had the power to change it. She was putting her trust in me. I will make sure she wouldn't regret that. And this is the point where I'm pretty blind to how the new game goes. The last scene where Miss Tamora just kind of called Celeste a murderer, that was the last scene I saw before I decided I was going to record this whole series. And I think it was probably, I mean, I don't know what's going to happen in the rest of this case, but I would be surprised if there was a better addition to that, because it makes a lot more sense why Tyrion is defending Celeste instead of Ruby from the original game, and also gives some foreshadowing if you're aware of the events that play in the rest of this game. Anyways, it still hadn't sunk in yet. I was standing in a real courtroom. I'd only ever acted as Mr. Morris' assistant. Now I was front and center at the defense table. Are you okay? Yes, of course. Maybe if I kept saying that, it would end up being true. That woman from the dungeons was also here. She must have been the prosecutor for last trial. It was kind of crazy how her voice changed 3 times in that room. No wonder she was able to order around the commander like that. I could feel her piercing glare burrowing at me. Why was she looking at me like that? Was she trying to intimidate me? Because it was definitely working. Order! Court is now in session for the trial of Celeste McCoy. The prosecution is ready, Your Honor. The defense is also ready, Your Honor. Very well. Prosecutor Steelwind, could you please list the charges? The defendant is Celeste McCoy, a mercenary by trade and a registered mage. She's charged with second-degree murder and negligent misuse of the arcane arts. The crime occurred within McCoy Taverns, a local inn that was shut down years ago. Those who lived nearby reported hearing a loud argument come from within the building around 1 a.m. At 1:08 a.m., a carriage driver entered the tavern to investigate the disturbance. It was there that he found the victim, the defendant's sword impaled within his body. The Inquisition has provided an autopsy report and documentation for the sword. Autopsy report. Died at 1:12 a.m. after being stabbed from behind with a magical blade. Facial wound shows heavy traces of transmutation magic. Am I crazy, or did the witness not arrive at 1:08? Was that... Wait, did I... Celeste's sword, the alleged murder weapon. It's an ornately designed sword, but it has no magical properties. Where is the text? Oh, we entered the village. No, entered the tavern. So, so he didn't die until after he walked. So, Flinhart was just on the ground for like 10 minutes then. Oh god. What was the defendant's relationship with the victim? I see that they share the same last name. The defendant is the victim's daughter, but not by blood. She was adopted into the family when she was an infant. Her birth parents are currently unknown. I see. What an unfortunate turn of events. To begin, the prosecution would like to call Commander Orym White to the stand. Witness, please state your name and occupation for the court. Witness, name and occupation. Name's Orym White. I'm the commander of the Arcane Inquisition. Commander, please testify about the details of the Inquisition's investigation. Yeah. Witness testimony. We got a call late at night. Someone found a dead body inside McCoy Tavern. When we arrived on the scene, we found Flinhart McCoy dead on the floor. The defendant's sword was still in his chest. We have a bunch of witnesses who heard the victim and defendant in a loud argument before the body was called in. That argument must have turned ugly because the defendant killed the old man using her magic sword. This was going to be difficult. The defendant's sword was the murder weapon. It was possible that the murderer used it to frame her. That must have meant that the crime was premeditated. Yes, I don't think someone accidentally grabs a sword and impales somebody with it by accident. Although I guess I've just realized we haven't actually seen the body yet, so he doesn't know that. Mr. Cuthbert, you may begin your cross-examination. Those are new words to me. Mr. Cuthbert? Where was I supposed to start again? I needed to prove that Celeste was innocent, but they found her sword on the body. Tyrion, this is the part where you say something right. Say words. I know you can do it. I've seen you do it before. The longer I stood there, the more I noticed everyone staring at me. I could feel the case cracking. Each moment of silence was just another blow to my credibility. I wanted to face Ruby tomorrow today, not her bumbling sidekick. Your Honor, the defense clearly has nothing to say against the prosecution's overwhelming evidence. Yep, this whole thing's pretty open and shut. No, wait. I can say words. I'm so sorry, Tyrion. I didn't do enough for Frey. Now she's... But Miss Tamora, does this mean they're going to execute her? No, not again. Was I seriously going to watch it happen again? Tyrion! Her palm creaked across my face. I stumbled back and almost fell over. She had every right to be angry, but that wasn't what I saw on her face. Uh, I'm sorry, Celeste. Stop. Just listen to me. You trained for this, right? You know what to do. I've never done this before. She cursed under her breath. Fuck. She searched her mind for an answer. It just treated like something you have done before. I don't know, you're good at chess, right? Think of it, this chess, knight beats rook or something. So just treat this whole thing like you're playing chess. What? I don't know, yesterday you were calm and you were focused. So just channel that feeling. Look at the pieces on the board, or something like that. He made a lot of statements. Every statement that he made, every word that came out of his mouth, they were all just pieces on the board. A match wasn't won from the first move. It came from developing the pieces I had and taking every advantage that presented itself. I apologize, Your Honor. The defense is ready to begin the cross-examination. Seeing as this is your first trial, Mr. Cuthbert, I'll overlook it this one time. There we go. Thank the gods. I don't know how much that actually worked. I needed to carefully examine every statement he made, line by line. The key to every cross-examination was identifying which statement contradicted the evidence in my notes. Once I did that, I needed to present the contradicting evidence. So I actually remember what the contradiction is. Oh, that's new music. And this is another thing I said last time. Why are we showing Miriam when we can just show Orym? Whatever. You started cross-examining a witness. The key to each cross-examination is to determine which part of the witness's testimony contradicts any of the items in your notes. Use the arrows to carefully examine each statement in the witness testimony, identify the contradicting statement, and present the item that contradicts it. So like I was saying, I know the contradiction is here, but I'm just gonna get all the dialogue, because why not? Press. What time did you get this call, and who discovered the body? The call came in at 1:08 a.m. and the witness wanted to remain incognito. It wasn't unusual for a witness to request anonymity. It was well within their rights. But it would have been a lot easier if I could cross-examine the witness directly. What happened when you arrived, Commander? Also, not to toot my own horn, but I feel like I've really started to... It's not perfect yet, and I feel like after a couple more episodes I'm going to get it. But I do feel like I'm kind of getting close to what I want with Orym's and Aria's voices. And the same with Celeste, but I do feel like I'm kind of clicking back into my own voice, really. But I'm kind of clicking back into Tyrion's voice when I do Celeste, but it's fine. I think I'm getting the hang of things now. When we arrived on the scene, we found Flinhar McCoy dead on the floor. The defendant's sword was still in his chest. How were you so sure that the sword was my client's? Her sword is made out of some weird alloy. I think it was forged out of the country or something. It'd be hard to mistake something like that. We also have several eyewitnesses who verified that the sword belonged to the defendant. She made no effort to hide it from the public, quite the contrary. She was quite proud to show it off. Even so, that doesn't necessarily mean that she was the one who stabbed him. Yeah, well... We have a bunch of witnesses who heard the victim and the defendant in a loud argument before the body was called in. How did they know that it was my client who was arguing with the victim? Because her voice, You were there, weren't you? Don't tell me you didn't hear them. Every witness we talked to knew it was them. I couldn't really argue with him there. Celeste and Flinhart had very distinct voices, especially when they were raised. I'm so glad that Flinhart didn't have like the exact same voice as the knight in the last episode. Very distinct. The argument must have turned ugly because the defendant killed the old man using her magic sword. I was there when the argument took place. Flinhart was still alive when my client left the tavern. Perhaps, but how do you know that she didn't return to murder her father afterwards? Weren't there plenty of other people around who could have committed the crime? That tavern's been closed for years. The defendant, the victim, and Timora were the only ones there before the body was discovered. Plus, the murder weapon was her sword. It was a given that Miss Timora didn't do this. Another person must have shown up at the tavern after Celeste and I left. Could it have been the witness who discovered the body? His testimony was straightforward, but that's exactly what would help me. Celeste was innocent, so there had to be a flaw in his logic. I just needed to compare each statement to each piece of evidence in my notes. Once I found the contradiction, I just needed to present that piece of evidence to the contradicting statement. So, a magic sword, you say? Well, objection. Objection! Commander White, are you sure that the victim was killed using the defendant's sword? Yeah, it's pretty obvious from the crime scene. I think I'd have to disagree with you on that. If your testimony is true, the defendant's sword couldn't have been the murder weapon. What are you talking about, kid? The sword was inside his body. That may be, but take another look at the autopsy report. It says that the fatal wound contained traces of transmutation magic. You even testified that the sword was magical. So, what's your point? It's simple. How could a non-magical blade leave traces of magic in the wound? What? My client's sword may look unique, but it's entirely non-magical. It couldn't have left those traces of transmutation on the wound. It doesn't make a lick of sense. If the sword didn't kill him, then why was it in his body? There's only one reasonable explanation. The wound was created magically, and someone shoved the sword into the wound afterwards. And that girl's a mage. She could have easily whacked that old man using magic. Why would she murder the victim using a spell, only to then stab him with her sword? She would just be incriminating herself. If anything, this series of events proves something else entirely. Someone used magic to murder the victim, then pushed my client's sword into the wound to frame her. Objection! Don't get ahead of yourself, Mr. Cuthbert. Your Honor, the defense is suggesting that another person used the sword to frame the defendant, but the defendant clearly cast a spell on the sword at the time of the murder. Should they cast a spell? Commander, testify as to how magic was used during the murder. What? Alright. I see where you're going with this. The sword itself ain't magical, but spells can still be cast on it. That defendant over there, her spells compendium got a spell named Mage Blade. She must have cast it on her sword before stabbing the old man. That spell is the reason why we found traces of magic on the body. Mage Blade. For the duration of the spell, the edges of the object blah 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 blah. The spell compendium listed every spell a mage knew how to cast. It was a fundamental piece of evidence that proved which spells a mage could and couldn't use. I am actually gonna just read that quickly, because I realize. Also, I'm just gonna mention this while I hear, like the image here of Mage Blade. I remember when I played it, I can't remember what it was. I wasn't I can't remember if like, I know there's like other classes of magic in this game. And I remember that when I first played it, right when it released, each like each type of class had its own color. But I also think that each Each class had its own symbol. It's like for Mage Blade, since its transmutation it would be yellow. But there was also a certain symbol that went with it. I can't remember what it was. If you watch my old videos, you could probably see it. But I think now in the updated, each spell is gonna have its own uh icon. Because I don't remember this being the universal transmutation symbol. So that's cool. Okay. It was a fundamental piece of evidence that proved which spells a mage could and couldn't use. Celeste, do you have your spell compendium with you? No, my dad was the last person who had it. What? Why would Flinhart have her spell compendium? But he's right. I know how to cast Mage Blade. It's actually the only spell I know. I would like to add that we found traces of transmutation magic on the defendant's sword as well. As I'm sure the court knows, magical traces stay on objects for 48 hours after a spell is cast on them. The sword. Cool. Transmutation magic on the sword. Those 48 hours really tighten the timeline for cases like these. Because of that, crimes needed to be investigated before all the magical traces disappeared from the crime scene. It also gave the courts the perfect excuse to push these cases through the system as quickly as possible. Mr. Cuthbert, you may begin your cross-examination. The commander's testimony was a lot bigger this time. He probably wasn't expecting to give a second testimony. Rests in his statements really helped in situations like this. Doing that might reveal new pieces of evidence that I could use against him. Yes, I did this last time. Are you accusing my client of casting a spell and channeling it through her sword? There are a vast number of spells that operate like that. Spells from the school of transmutation are almost exclusively channeled through an object. Your client clearly learned a spell that would aid her work as a mercenary. Speaking of which, I'm so glad that Aria decided to speak for him, because Orym's voice really taxes me, even though it's only been like 5 minutes. Mage Blade? It's a transmutation spell that sharpens... I don't know what that was. It's a transmutation spell that sharpens them and empowers my sword. Wouldn't it be excessive for the defendant to use a spell like that on the victim? He wasn't wearing any armor or protection at the time of his death. The victim and the defendant were in an intense argument. Perhaps she used the spell in a fit of rage. Perhaps she simply cast it out of habit. What matters is that the sword undeniably has traces of transmutation magic on it. Why would she go to the trouble of doing that? Her sword alone would have been enough to murder a defenseless person. Mages are always looking for an excuse to throw their power around. There's no rhyme or reason to it. Isn't that just your own personal bias, Commander? We don't need to understand why the defendant did what she did. The fact of the matter is that the traces of magic were found on the body and the sword. Do you have any evidence of the contrary, Mr. Cuthbert? About that, spells only leave magical traces on the objects they target, and those traces are only detectable for 48 hours. If my client cast a Mage Blade like you said, there shouldn't have been any magical traces on the wound. There would only be traces on the sword. We always find random magical traces at the crime scenes. We can't always explain each trace we detect. That sounds more like a failure on the Inquisition's part than anything else. Can we really trust that your knights examined the crime scene properly? You don't believe me? Take a look at this picture. Huh. I'd seen pictures of dead bodies while studying Miss Tamora's past cases, but there was something unnerving about seeing someone I'd met just yesterday. I carefully inspected the photo, taking great care to keep it out of Celeste's view. You can see it here as plain as day. The sword has the highest concentration of transmutation traces. But why didn't those traces fully cover the weapon? Did the transmutation spell damage the sword somehow? Why was this picture not brought to my attention, Orym? What would be the point of that? This entire case is open and shut. The prosecutor seemed unnerved by something. You can see it right there in that photo. She stabbed him right through the chest using mage blade. I feel like that my voice is getting more gravelly as time goes on. He was right about the photo. It clearly showed that he was stabbed from the front. So why did that bother me so much? His testimony was a little bit vague this time. Preston's statements might prove useful in a situation like this. That would let me ask questions about his testimony and discover more details about the case. Autopsy. Yeah, stabbed from behind. Right through the chest. Okay, is this? Objection! I'm sorry, Commander White, but you've shown us an even more glaring contradiction. Oh yeah. In your testimony, you said that my client stabbed the victim right through the chest. You can see it right there in that picture. So where's your contradiction? That's exactly the problem, Commander. Your picture undeniably shows my client's sword impaled the victim from the front, but if that's really true, why does the autopsy say that he died from being stabbed in the back? What? Orym, you were supposed to admit everything you had to me. Why did you withhold this photo? There was no point. She's a mage. It couldn't have been anyone else. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Even the judge shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Our justices may have been corrupt, but they never get away with such a blatant error. Order! Order! Order in the court. Mr. Cuthbert, what is the meaning of this? Your Honor, this photo clearly shows my client's sword impaling him from the front. Which means there's only one way for the autopsy to be true. The sword would have needed to be inserted into the wound after the victim had died. That's crazy. Then why don't you enlighten me, Commander White? Do you think my client impaled the victim hilt first with her sword? Or do you think she stabbed him through the chest, removed it, then placed the sword in the body to frame herself? No, what happened here is obvious. The real murderer stuck the sword through the victim's wound to implicate my client, but they made a careless mistake and stuck the sword through the opposite side. Down. Oh wow, you're actually pretty good at this. I thought I would have already been executed an hour ago. Objection. It appears I underestimated you, but you still got ahead of yourself. Is that so, Miss Steelwind? Let me ask the defense one question, Mr. Cuthbert. If your client didn't kill Flinhart McCoy, then who did? How should I know? If I'm not mistaken, it's the commander's job to figure that out. Oh, I'm well aware of the commander's incompetence, but one fact still stands. There are magical traces on the wound and the sword. Would you like me to tell you how many mages live in that small town? I didn't like where she was going with this. Only one. The defendant is the only registered mage who lives in Cornhaven. Right. Cornhaven was a village of farmers. Celeste was the only mage there. The defendant was also established to have been with the victim minutes before his time of death. In addition to that, I have several witnesses who heard them arguing. You, on the other hand, can only implicate an unknown assailant. I doubt you can even tell me who they are. Even so, it's clear that the prosecution can't reliably prove how the victim was murdered. I can't say that the prosecution's evidence is irrefutable, but the evidence still leans heavily against the defense. There are far too many unanswered questions for me to pass a verdict. We will give the Inquisition time to investigate the crime scene and clear these unknowns. I suggest that they conduct their investigation more thoroughly this time. We will resume the trial tomorrow morning. Court is adjourned. Okay, we're still going. Hello, Cuthbert. Oh, Mr. Moore, hi. I tensed as she approached me. I've been so focused on Celeste's case, I hadn't even thought about how I'd left things with my mentor. Skilled Lord. She had probably been in the gallery too. She must have seen how I froze up during the first cross-examination. Your job is to put your client at ease, not the other way around. Sorry. I'm sure she was just snapping you out of it, but everyone saw her become violent with you. That's not exactly helpful if you want to prove she's not a violent murderer. Make no mistake, the prosecution will use that to their advantage. What's wrong with you? He did fine. McCoy, if the Inquisition didn't botch the investigation, Cuthbert would have never been able to buy this much time. In case you've forgotten, he's my defense attorney, not you. I don't get why he has to take notes from you. No, she's right, Celeste. I need to do better. I can't ever let myself freeze up like that again. I might not be so lucky next time. Other than that, I'll admit that you did well. You cross-examined the commander adequately, and you handled Steelwind's rebuttals as well as you could have. I remembered how Prosecutor Steelwind was glaring at me at the start of the trial. Even thinking about it was enough to make me nauseous. Steelwind. Why did that name sound so familiar? Well, I mean, if you're gonna act coy about who she actually is, then don't tell us that she's one of the four pillars. Wait. Oh, okay. Wait, isn't now Steelwind one of the four pillar families? That's right. Lucius Steelwind is the Grand General of Wyvernguard's military. Hasn't he been caught up in a lot of scandals recently? Scandals? He's been having people killed by the thousands. Right, I remember seeing several articles about him in the Rathhome Gazette. In recent years, groups voicing their grievances against the crown have begun to surface in the countryside. King Olivier would answer their complaints by unleashing Steelwind soldiers on these so-called insurrectionists. More often than not, their peaceful protests turned violent, leading to bloody retaliations from Lucio's forces. And Aria is Lucio Steelwind's only heir. When I saw her name on the docket, I wrote her off as a noble role-playing for fun. But she's good, better than most of the prosecutors I've faced. She's taking this seriously, and with what Flinhart was doing, I can't help but wonder if the prosecutor is acting on her father's behalf. Do you think that Prosecutor Steelwind is protecting the real killer? The Inquisition Knights were the first responders to the scene. Didn't that strike you as odd? Right, in a small town like Cornhaven, the village... Militia? I do not. I want to assume that means like the village protectors would be the first people there. For the Inquisition to respond so quickly, they would have needed to know that magic was used at all. This whole mess feels a little too staged, and with a Steelwind involved, this whole situation reeks of corruption. I'm sure locking up Flinhart's daughter would send a clear message to his allies. But if that were true, why did she help us in the dungeons? Either way, this works out in our favour. I can't fight the Steelwinds on a battlefield, but I can fight them in the courtroom. On that subject, I've been meaning to give you this. My spell compendium? I grabbed it from the dining room before the Inquisition arrived. They have a bad habit of misplacing pieces of evidence like this. Celeste's spell compendium. Celeste McCoy's spell compendium. It contains the formula for only one spell. Mageblade. So, this is your spell compendium, and it only has one spell. Mageblade. The prosecution will need to prove that Mageblade was used in the murder. It will restrict their plan of attack, which will give you an edge over them. But I still have no idea who actually did this. Celeste, I need to talk to you about what your father was doing. Oh. She glanced at the bailiff. He was looming close, staring daggers at her. I should go. It looks like they can't wait to throw me back into that cell. Wait, I still... Ah. She turned away and quickly walked off without another word. Miss Tamora just shook her head. She's practically begging for a conviction at this rate. Bringing up her late father may have struck a nerve. I will need to be more delicate next time. I can speak with her in the dungeons later. Right now, I want to take a look at the crime scene. With how negligent the Inquisition were, I doubt they found everything. If you're planning to investigate the crime scene, you'll need this. She reached into her coat and pulled out a small blue runestone. I froze for a moment, staring wide-eyed at it. Is that? Attorney's runestone, a magical runestone that allows you to... Blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. It's an attorney's runestone. I had it commissioned for you after you passed the exam last month. You've had one ready this entire time? Cuthbert, are you crying? Okay. No. No. I wiped my eyes and delicately stored the runestone in the pocket of my jacket. You embarrassed them today. Don't expect them to be that sloppy again. As much as I hate to admit it, your investigative mind is sharper than mine. If anyone can get through this, it's you. Oh, thank you. She turned to take a seat at the bench near the courtroom entrance. It looked like she would be staying here until the case was over. I tucked Celeste's spell compendium into my jacket. My hand slept and my body still ached from the carriage ride. I still didn't know whether I was truly up to this, but none of that mattered. Celeste was counted on me, and I wouldn't let anyone get away with killing Flinhart, even if the Steelwinds were involved. Okay, and that is going to be the end of part 2. Overall thoughts, the trial segment was pretty much the same, except for the graphics. I'd have to look at the old courtroom, but I'm pretty sure that I prefer this one. The old one had more bright colored wood, and everything was more like one color, but this time it feels more majestic, I guess is the word. And now that I'm actually thinking this out loud, I'm just realizing that the final courtroom, where spoilers, but in case 5, there's a different courtroom, and I'm wondering how they're going to update that, because I assume they updated that if they updated this courtroom. But anyways, with that being said, I want to end the part next time, and I'll see you in part 3, where we investigate the tavern, meet Celeste's mom, and learn about who could have possibly murdered Flinhart, which we already know who, because the start of the game showed us. But anyways, we'll see that next time. Bye bye.